Welcome one and all. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to all of you that are attending this meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission. This is our Committee of the Whole meeting. This is a work meeting where we focus on one particular agenda topic generally and do a deeper dive. So I am officially calling the City of Kalamazoo Commission Committee of the Whole meeting to order for Monday, August 15th, 2022. Clerk Borling, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Hess. Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Juarez. Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Vice Mayor Cooney.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. May I please have a motion to excuse Commissioner Hess and Commissioner Juarez from the meeting?
So moved.
Motion
Support.
made by Commissioner Hoffman,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Pradel. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion passes. Communications, City Manager Ritzma.
There are none, Your Honor.
Now is the opportunity for public comments. I want to remind everybody that this will be the only opportunity for public comments for our Committee of the Whole meeting. There will be an opportunity later during our business meeting to make public comments as well. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes during the Committee of the Whole meeting. You can come up to the front here. If you're interested in making a public comment, please give us your name and whether you live in the city. And first I'll ask if there's anybody in the chambers this evening who wants to make a public comment.
Hello, my name is Michael Slowick, and I am a student at Western Michigan University, so I don't live in Kalamazoo permanently, but I am here for that. But I am the PR coordinator for WMU's Civil Discourse Initiative, We Talk. This fall, We Talk is partnering with the Fetzer Institute and StoryCorps, two national nonprofits, to make WMU a One Small Step recording site. One Small Step will be an amazing opportunity for the members of the Kalamazoo community to meet someone new, someone they have opposing political views with. The ultimate goal of One Small Step is to combat political polarization that seems to be plaguing American politics. Participants fill out a short survey, which is then used to match them with someone from the opposite side of the political spectrum. Once matched, the two community members then will have a loosely facilitated 50-minute conversation, not about politics, but about who they are as people. One Small Step helps remind us that we all have a shared humanity, and despite political and ideological differences, we are all human and have more in common than we might realize. To sign up for a One Small Step conversation, visit wmich.edu/wetalk. Once there, go to the One Small Step page and then click the sign up link to get started. I have packets of information for each of you up there, and then I'll leave extras at the end if anyone else is interested. And yeah, so let's take one small step together and join the conversation to be a part of the change. Thank you for your time, and have a wonderful night, and don't forget to sign up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming to see us this evening. An admirable undertaking. Anyone else in the chambers? Seeing no one else in the chambers, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain, is there anyone who has called in to provide a comment?
We'll go ahead and check, and just as a reminder, people can call in at 888-382-9556, and we'll go ahead and check. We do not have any calls.
Thank you very much for taking care of that for us, Deputy City Manager Chamberlain. I appreciate it. We are now down to the heart of the matter here this evening in terms of our work agenda. Manager Ritzma.
Thank you, Mayor. And we have two exciting topics this evening as part of our work session. First, I would like to ask our Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo Coordinator, Kevin Ford, to come forward to present on Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo. Kevin?
Mr. Ford, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see. Hello? Oh, there we go. Good to see everybody. Hold on. Okay, I got my clicker. I got some notes as well. Okay. Okay, so let's hop right in. Before we get started, I wanted to kind of level set, since we're sharing this space and this time together. I think it's important we have a shared understanding of a few things. And this is directly from my experiences in other spaces and some of the questions and comments that have come up. So I want to address it now. So first thing, SBK is not a solution to 100% of our community's challenges. I know that's obvious, but again, a lot of questions just in some form or variation reflect a lack of understanding around that, right? What about this? What about that? What are you doing about this? It wasn't designed to be that, and even if it was, it still wouldn't work. It takes many of us to address some of these issues. Second thing, I don't have answers to every question that may arise tonight. Again, I know that's obvious, but I want to state that for the record, in which case I'll just be transparent and keep it real. I don't know. I'll say that. Where feasible, I get the answer or try to get the answer and definitely circle back with folks, but just not a lack of incompetence or fumbling, but just being transparent. And lastly, the systems thinking piece. This work is highly complex and highly uncertain, as just the nature of it. And so I want us to think about systems and the interconnectedness and interplay of things as we engage in this topic, in this conversation tonight, right? So I just wanted to get that out there again as a form of level setting. So let's hop right in. I want to thank you all for this opportunity. It's been maybe over 2 years since I've spoken in person to City Commission. This feels kind of like a first date, but I want to thank you all for this opportunity to have this conversation and to get into this. So we'll hop right in. Okay. And so, as stated earlier, I'm Kevin Ford. I'm the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo Coordinator for the City of Kalamazoo out of Community Planning and Economic Development Department. I have a guest with me this evening, Michael Evans from Kalamazoo Literacy Council. We'll get more into what he'll be helping me talk about this evening. And it was told to me that some of the slides may have small script. You may not be able to see them. So in which case, just indicate that. I'll read it out so everybody can see it. So the first thing in terms of SBK, it occurred to me when my colleague reached out for this presentation that only 2 of the city commissioners have been around since the inception of SBK. And it made me think, as another element of level setting and grounding and establishing a shared understanding, to give us some background around SBK and some of the basic components of SBK. So we'll have that as a point of discussion. First thing, the vision of SBK, as highlighted in this slide, a community where no adult or child is left behind or isolated due to poverty or inequality. So a lot of these points, basic points of SBK, were established before I was hired in 2017. This was kind of the DNA and the bones of SBK. A lot of folks contributed a lot of work to establishing that. This is one of those elements. And so thinking about this vision of a future desired state, I want you to keep in mind the aspect of adults and children. We'll talk about that later and how it connects with this work. So the next slide is just some Spk basics. Who, what, why, where, how. So what is Sbk? It's an initiative of the city organization. It's not a programming. It's not a program, I should say. I don't direct any programming currently. That may change, but right now I don't direct any staff internally or externally as it relates to specific SBK programming. It's an initiative of the city. What's our why, right? SBK exists to reduce poverty and advance prosperity in the city of Kalamazoo, primarily in our most distressed communities. So I'll speak more about that throughout tonight's presentation, but some recurring themes important to this work: place-based and people-based, right? So the power of place and how that relates to this work. And so currently, that's 3 neighborhoods. Again, I'll touch on that in some upcoming slides. The who and the where, like I said, is people-based, specific populations, primarily low-income populations, but there are some others, and it's place-based. And then how are we getting this work done and moving forward to our future desired state, primarily by partnering with organizations and efforts in the community. We have received some funding from Foundation for Excellence. We currently have some from FFE and some from ARPA funds. But as I said earlier, I don't run programming, so it's purely based on partnerships, a lot of conversations, a lot of coffee conversations. I like to think that I have some charisma, but I know that's not entirely how we get things done. But it's primarily through partnering and establishing shared points of interest and understanding in terms of moving this work forward. So the next slide is around the focus areas of SBK. Again, this was another element that was established before I arrived in this position. Families, jobs, and youth were 3 things that were highlighted in the work of the original folks that investigated poverty reduction, not only in the community, but across the nation. And as a point of clarification, so the goals associated with these focus areas are universal goals. I know this is about SBK, but I want to clarify that it benefits every organization, every effort in our community to help folks to have strong, economically secure families. It benefits every organization to have increased access to good jobs in our community. And it benefits every organization the effort to have children that have healthy development, have healthy education, and healthy environments. So again, these are universal things. SBK just targets specific, again, place-based. And the next slide will reflect that. So these are our target neighborhoods of SBK. This is a map of the city boundaries, all the neighborhoods in the city proper. And SBK work focuses on Edison neighborhood, East Side neighborhood, and North Side neighborhood. Those neighborhoods currently have the highest amounts of poverty in our community and highest concentrations of demographics of people of color. This has been persistent over decades. So I grew up on the East Side, my wife grew up on the North Side. It was low income when we grew up there. And again, this has been persistent over many decades. And so that's the rationale for focusing on these 3 neighborhoods, this place, this geographic place, again, being place-based and people-based around low-income families in our core neighborhoods. When I say core neighborhoods, these are the 3 neighborhoods that I'm talking about. And so the next slide is a historical timeline and some milestones associated with SBK. As I said, a lot of this work was established before I came officially into the position in 2017. 2014, at that time, City Commission identified poverty as a key issue that the city should address, particularly child poverty. And Similar to how you all have been discussing gun violence reduction, it was a similar discussion at that time. A lot of folks involved in spearheading that conversation and that effort were associated with the Kalamazoo County Poverty Reduction Initiative, which was a nonprofit that was the county game in town as it related to poverty reduction. And I think they lasted a little bit over a decade. But the people involved, a lot of people involved in that were connected to the city, elected officials, as academics, et cetera, community members, but really spearheading the idea that the city organization should look at reducing poverty in our community. So that was around 2014. Again, I wasn't hired until 2017, but I had an assistantship with city manager's office at the time, and city commission identified poverty reduction as priority number 5. And 2015, I would consider that our jobs year. If you think about the slide that had the focus areas, that was kind of our jobs year. We engaged private sector businesses heavily to educate them on the challenges that people in poverty are facing. So we had an event in the spring of 2015, and then in the fall again, working to engage private sector business. 2016 rolls around, and there's an appetite to engage with youth in some capacity, and quite frankly, we struggled with that at first because it's a wide gamut when you talk about youth. It could be early childhood, the little ones, all the way up to young adults. So we struggled in terms of how to really address that. And an opportunity arose to focus on middle school youth in particular. And that blossomed into the creation of All Things Possible program, which is now housed in Parks and Recreation. But initially, that was over a year's worth of work from soup to nuts, creating that program. It launched an interfaith. There's a lot of lessons learned from that. But that was essentially our year, 2016. 2017 rolls around, and it's an appetite for from folks around the table to establish a plan, something written as it relates to SBK. And so we engaged in planning session in the fall of 2017. That was a 4-month process, engaging in multiple community stakeholders. It resulted in City Commission approving our SBK action plan May 2018. And with that approval, we created an organizer committee, which is a public body associated with SBK, goal teams around the focus areas. We received some support from Foundation for Excellence, in which we were able to deploy dollars in the community for our first round. And 2018 to 2020, another thing that we did was adopt a 2-generation approach, a 2-generation lens to this work that we're involved in. I'll speak about that later, but it's a whole family approach to the work. And again, I'll touch on that in some later slides and why that's important. And so we had the opportunity to go to Austin, Texas to talk to the United Way. They had just started their 2-generation roadmap, talk to communities and schools and some other workforce development entities in terms of how they were going about their work, and learned a lot. So we come back to Kalamazoo, and we initiate a second round of community support. And some highlights from the first round I wanna mention. One was supporting a workforce development program, a neighborhood-based workforce development program at NACD. It's a CNA pilot. And the SBK support allowed them to accelerate this pilot to launch. Upon launching, they were able to access and leverage other community resources to help with that pilot. 75% of the participants that went through that either got into the healthcare field as jobs, or were able to increase their earnings by obtaining that CNA license. Another highlight from the first round was the support of the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, the Vita program. And Vita is a program, it's a federal program implemented locally. They help low to moderate income residents access tax refunds, earn income tax credit, child care tax credit, housing tax credit, just a plethora of different tax credits, and also mitigates the possibility that they would engage in predatory financial products like rapid advance loans or fee-based tax assistance, right? And so with that support, that was countywide, but again, focusing on our core neighborhoods, they were able to assist over 600 people in our core neighborhoods with refunds amounting to over 800,000 that came back to core neighborhood residents. So there was some progress to date from first round. The second round, instituting learnings from the first, we were able to implement some technological changes that help with the process in terms of getting the word out, focus more on the two-generation approach and make that explicit, and also increase the support around organizations in the community from 5 to 8. And much of that work is still in progress, so not a lot to report on the second round. However, these are the cohort organizations that are currently in our second round. Kalamazoo Literacy Council just recently finished their project, and we had the honor of having Mr. Michael Evans, the executive director of the Kalamazoo Literacy Council, to speak about that project that was SBK supported and to provide some insights around that. So I'm gonna bring up Mr. Michael Evans, Executive Director of Kalamazoo Literacy Council, to speak about that, and then I'm going to have a 2-gen overview. You could just use this clip.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you very much, commissioners. It's our pleasure to be able to present some of the work that we've been doing with our Parent Literacy Together project in partnership with Goodwill Industries of Southwestern Michigan and several other community organizations that we work with in the Edison neighborhood. So first of all, my name is Michael Evans. I'm the Executive Director of the Kalamazoo Literacy Council. Most or many of you know who I am, but you may not necessarily know that I live in the Edison neighborhood, work in the Edison neighborhood, and have been doing this work pretty consistently since August 2nd of 2010. Our explicit purpose is to make sure that adults in our community have the literacy and language skills necessary to be successful at their goals. One of their most prominent goals is to make sure that they are prominent and capable of being first teachers of their children. So we really made the commitment to make sure that 100% of the parents who enter into our adult literacy, adult basic education, English as a second language programs, and our community programs have access to quality, multi-generational learning so that they can be more confident and capable first teachers of their children. That program is called the Parent Literacy Together program, and it is designed to first help those parents who come to us to be able to have those skills necessary to be able to help their children be academically successful at every stage of their development, from little scholars, as we call them, all the way up until graduation into college. We have that commitment because our board of directors, they made a very firm commitment to make sure that 100% of our population was capable in these skills and had access to quality multi-generational services that work. We're focusing on the Edison neighborhood because that's where we have the greatest amount of capacity, and we have been there at the Goodwill Industries site working with the adult education and training program since 2010, but we've also extended services all throughout the Edison neighborhood and have created a network of providers and supporters to be able to wrap our parents around with the services they need to be successful with their children. Some of the things that have happened is we had about 328 adult learners who were studying with us. About 180 of them were parents. We wanted to make sure we reached all of them. Those we did reach were 176 who were enrolled in this neighborhood project to make sure that they had access to those services. We wanted to make sure that we didn't just gather them, that there were opportunities for them to learn while their children were learning, learn with their children, and to be able to take these strategies home to be able to learn on their own. Most of the learning that we find with our parents happens when they're away from them. One of the things that motivates me as the executive director of the Kalamazoo Literacy Council is this: 72% of adults or children born to adults with low literacy skills are likely to repeat that cycle. My job is to make sure that we achieve a fully literate community, and if we're not looking at the parents and the children at the same time, we're not really doing anything but working on one end of the spectrum. This whole family approach that Kevin talked about is very important to us, and we wanted to be able to have strategies that achieve those outcomes. 108 of those parents, they reported increasing engagement in their children's learning. Most of them came to us for some other reason first. I'm trying to fill out my paperwork, I'm working on my English skills, there's this thing called COVID-19, I need access to virtual services for employment applications. But if they were a parent, we said you also have another goal if this is not your first, and that is to be a confident and capable first teacher of your children. We were able to reach those 108, so most of them were able to increase their engagement. In what ways? Most of them, when we were talking about what can you do with your children at home, they can be prepared to make sure that at every stage of their child's development, they know what their next steps are. We aligned all of our services and all of our strategies around what the public schools were asking for. We used their strategic plan to make sure that our adult education was relevant at every stage of development. We worked with partners like the WMU, McGinnis Reading Clinic and Center to come up with innovative strategies that did not repeat what was happening at school, but created new strategies to engage through non-traditional means, such as maybe having an outdoor classroom in our Read and Seed community garden, or getting really good at having virtual learning with parents and their little scholars, or having on-site childcare for those who may not have childcare available, so that childcare is not a barrier to learning. 132 of those children, of those parents, they received direct services through us. So it was not just serving the adult learners, the children were actually getting services with us and with their parents at the same time. Again, our model is learn while your children learn with your children, and learn continually at home. 79 of those children, they attended what we call the Little Scholars Child Development Center. That would not have been possible were it not for the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo to open up this child care center. It's free, it's on-site, located at the Goodwill Industries Adult Education and Training Program. It's staffed by an early learning support specialist who has a CDA and is capable of providing quality services aligned with the adult education programs that are right in the same wing. So if you can imagine, you're coming in for a GED, but you do not have child care, you bring your little scholar 2 rooms down, you have child care that's available. What are the little scholars studying? Similar things to you that you can talk about when you get home. So they have a common conversation, even at 0 to 4. Many of them have children who are older, so we send materials home, and our parent literacy navigator, who's also full-time, makes sure that they have capabilities of being able to execute those learnings while they have their weekly parent programs. 32 of the parents, they improved, in addition to their parenting skills, they improved their employment skills. These are the heads of households, so we want to make sure that they have access to greater employment opportunities. We've partnered pretty prolifically with a career pathway called the Edison Early Childhood Education Career Pathway, where adult learners who come into this program have access to a living wage job by learning how to do what they're already doing at home, taking care of their kids, but they can take care of others. That program we have in partnership with YWCA Kalamazoo, Child Care Resources, Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and several others who have been working for over 2 years to make sure we have a sustainable pathway for that type of work. And finally, for those who are on that long trail of getting a GED, without that Little Scholars Child Development Center, 5 of them probably would not have been able to achieve it within that time. So 5 were able to complete their GED studies, and 8 more have only 1 test to go within this short amount of time. We consider those to be pretty significant, if not impressive, outcomes within the time that we have, and our commitment is to continue to make sure that we can reach every parent in our neighborhood and those who want to become more confident and capable first teachers of their children. Some of our strategies is we have weekly parent literacy together sessions. These are groups that are led by our parent literacy navigator based off of the age of the children, the goals of the parent, and sometimes what type of studies that they are in. So our English as a second language class, these are English language learners that their studies are somewhat different than our basic literacy studies. Everything is customized around their goal, but they are always considered to be the first teacher of their children and armed with the strategies that work. We have monthly family literacy days. Most of them have been hosted at our Read and Seed community garden in the back of Goodwill Industries. It is not just a community garden. On those days, I am Farmer Mike. I used to be a farmer and love it very much. On the weekends, I still make sure I tend the garden with the garden crew, but we use that as an outdoor classroom to help parents to be able to have more tactile experiences where literacy and learning how to learn together in a community garden setting is something that you'll see. We also have the free childcare that's available for children 0 to 4 that is located right on the same site. So you can come to one building and be able to have little scholars learning with those who are also trying to get their GED, computer skills, job skills, all in one site. And finally, we have these navigation services. These are talented navigators who remove barriers to learning. Childcare being one, we have addressed that directly, but there's transportation, housing, finances, health, any other barrier that is in the way of their goals for academics or employment. We have navigators that work together as a unit to ensure that our parents can have the focus to be quality and capable adult learners and capable parents and first teachers to their children. Our partnerships are many. We've been extending them as we have other partnerships in the community with the expectation that we can bring our 2-gen approach to other programs and invite them to bring their expertise to our programs. Most of the times we see that either in exchange of curricular materials or in presentations at our family literacy days, whether they're virtual, indoor, or outdoor, we work together as a whole. So ultimately what we are interested in doing is looking at the Edison neighborhood differently. I live in this neighborhood, I know its challenges, and so do you, but we see Edison a little bit differently. If you break it down by its syllables, Edison, ed is on, education is on in Edison. And our job is to make sure that regardless of what level of learner you are, if you are a family in the Edison neighborhood, you know how to be able to work together as a unit, parent and child together, multi-generational, to be able to improve academic, literacy, and employment outcomes in our community. So I thank you very much to give you this brief overview. I know I was fast. Thank you, Kevin, for giving me the opportunity. If there's questions later, I'll still be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So that's just one organization that's within the current cohort. Like I said, other ones are in the process of either finishing up or some of them are going until next year. So I want to thank Michael for his time and sharing what's been going on in Edison. So you've heard about, I mentioned 2-generation approach, and Michael mentioned multi-generational. They are synonymous terms. It may be whole family, family focus, family first. All of these are synonymous with 2-generation. And so these next couple slides are going to go over just an overview of 2-generation approach. And we came to know about this through Ascend out of the Aspen Institute. The Annie Casey Foundation has engaged in 2-gen approach, and I think the Kellogg Foundation as well has dabbled in it and supported some 2-gen efforts. But in a nutshell, what the 2-gen approach is a strategy or set of strategies that address the needs of children and parents together. Now, that sounds simple enough, and it is in theory. In practice, we find over and over that that's not the reality in terms of programming in our community. And it's a reason for that. Most programs are designed to address the needs of one or the other. So we have a lot of youth or children's programming in our community, and that's what they focus on. We have some adult programming, that's what they focus on. But looking at the entire family is not just a matter of course of how we do business in our community, and in fact across the nation. Our community is not unique in terms of not looking at the entire family. And so why is this important? The two-gen approach uses the family's full potential to put them on a permanent path to economic security, right? We know from the early child care sector research and practice, the brain science and poverty reduction research, that the younger and the longer the duration a child is in poverty, it affects their outcomes in childhood and adulthood, right? And it affects the entire family. So we have, again, a plethora of organizations that tend to lean towards one or the other, but rarely looking at the entire family as a whole. And in practice, what this does is reduce the family's chances for success overall, right? If you can imagine a great youth program and then the youth going back to a household that's low income and the challenges that youth may face, or that family, or even worse, if they don't have housing to go to, right? They may attend a program but don't have housing to go to. And so the positive aspects of that youth programming will be negated by their family reality, right? So this is another reason it's important to look at the whole family and to take a whole family lens as we seek to do this work in partnership with folks in the community. Another thing I wanted to highlight as a point of clarity of what the two-generation approach is not a situation where you may have a community picnic and invite adults and children and families are there, right? Free food, free entertainment, etc. It's not a situation where 50 families get Pistons tickets and go see the game together. It is intentional and strategic, right, to position families in a better economic situation, right? And that could come through job training, it could come through education, as Michael stated, literacy, and the importance of literacy in not just a full quality of life, but in terms of accessing information, accessing resources, accessing employment, et cetera, right? So I wanted to clarify that because you may hear folks in the community saying, yeah, we already do two-gen work, or it's something close to that. But the bottom line is, if it's not helping that family improve their economic situation, it's some more work to be done there, right? So I wanted to clarify that. This next slide is from the Aspen Institute, and it's a visual of pretty much what I was talking about, looking again at the whole family. So it may be a child focus in terms of programming, but injecting adult elements. It may be an adult focus, but injecting some child elements. So as Michael mentioned, you may have adult elements of adult basic education, but inject some child elements in that you have child care on site. So both are learning, both are advancing at the same time. This could manifest itself in another way where you have a child center that has workforce development at the center for the adults, as another example. But again, bottom line, we try to look at the whole family in terms of putting them on a pathway to prosperity. The next slide, also from Aspen Institute, is around the two-gen components, right? And again, focusing on whole family overall, but these components making up integral parts of the two-gen approach as it relates to supporting the whole family. And this next slide, so we heard about where SBK came from, where it's been, kind of where we're at. This next slide is where we're going as it relates to other things we've been talking about this evening. And so if you look at this this slide, post-secondary and employment pathways and economic assets, where we're going is in that direction in terms of other SBK work. And why is this important? So we know the core neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods, by definition, they are earning either living wage or family-sustaining wage. And so thinking about this aspect of jobs and increasing access to good jobs, having strong economically secure families, continuing to look at 2Gen development, and even ALICE households. ALICE is an acronym from the work of United Way, asset limited, income constrained, employed. That's what that means. And they have some different nuances in terms of how they define ALICE. But if we're thinking of federal poverty level, if we unpack that, ALICE represents between 2 to 2.5 times the federal poverty level. And so this idea of post-secondary and employment pathways and positioning families to increase their income and earnings as a matter of this work. And then second, the economic asset development, right? So if we think about a prosperity pathway, we understand and we know housing is an important, home ownership is an important element to that. If we're helping folks to transition from low income to middle class or even anything close, we know there's many opportunities associated with that, but a different set of challenges. So again, if you use the example of home ownership, you're gonna have to take on some debt to own a home. If you have debt, you'll have to mitigate some of that. If you don't have it, you definitely will get it to own a home, even if it's highly subsidized. We know credit is important to that process. Emergency savings, so liquid assets, that's important to that process. I mentioned the Vita program earlier, that opportunity to access those services and get a potential financial windfall during tax time and use those dollars to help stabilize a family. All those things are important, right? We're trying to help people exit poverty and remain out of poverty, not have a revolving door. So we know that economic asset piece is an important part of that. With the post-secondary and employment pathways, you know, getting people to get access to good jobs, increase their income and earnings. As Michael mentioned, there are barriers associated with that. So a lot of that work is going to include barrier removal, supportive services, etc. And then you can start to begin to think about that. But a lot of our families, it's not at the front of their mind to develop economic assets, to even think about something like emergency savings, because they have other things at the fore of their mind. And that's our existing opportunities right now. Right now, we're partnering with the Promise to build this out, to work on this. Shout out to Sarah Clerk at the Promise. Her and I have been plotting and planning and thinking of ways to really push this work, this neighborhood-based workforce development, and really support families on a prosperity pathway. So the next slide is around challenges and some responses that we're working on in relation to those challenges. The first is addressing silos in our community. As I stated earlier, there's no one organization or effort that's going to help all the families in need or going to change the conditions that currently exist. So we're going to have to partner and work together. And addressing silos and not having a situation where we're basically fumbling around in the dark is something that's a perennial challenge. And so we're working to strengthen linkages, alignment, coordination, and partnership development as it relates to addressing silos and working together to support families in our core neighborhoods. Again, this is a perennial challenge. It's something that takes time, and, you know, the reality is we come up with linear plans, but families don't operate in a linear fashion. Families don't operate in one issue silos. So whatever services that are provided, whatever partnerships are developed should reflect really how families move. So we have to be fluid, we have to be honest with each other. It may be a situation of taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, in order to have the conversations that we need to strengthen our organizational infrastructure to really help families move forward. So that's one challenge, and that's not unique to our community. This is any community change initiative, from everything I've read and talked to folks about, this is a constant thing. Second thing around the 2Gen approach in particular is measuring outcomes for children and adults together. And we're working on figuring out effective and efficient ways to do that. Michael had mentioned his work with the Edison ECE project, and they have some tools in which they're beginning to do that. So it may be a situation where we work with them, and if it works, then we use that as well. Again, addressing that silos piece, so we're not trying to affect the same populations but using different things, right? And lastly, the short-term support. So with Michael's program in particular, that was 1 year. We've found out that the 1 year support is not effective. We need to establish some type of multi-year process, at least probably 3 years as a floor, right, as a sweet spot to begin. Doing the 1 year thing is like a politician running for office, and then like 6 months later, you're fundraising again for the next campaign. It's just not an effective way to get things done. And so looking at maintaining or increasing support in the community, but having it multi-year. This mitigates folks having to, you know, reapply or do paperwork every year. It gives everybody involved a peace of mind and just focus on the work and learn how we can improve upon that, right? So these are some things, challenges and responses in terms of the work. So next slide, looking at what will success look like based on what we've discussed tonight. So again, recurrent theme around place. Success will look like zip code, not determining destiny. There's some other slides I'm gonna really bring a fine point to that. But again, we know the place we focus on, the core neighborhoods, it's been persistent over time. So it's in a real way, you talk about generational or intergenerational, in a real way, zip code is determining destiny for a lot of families and children in our community. Success will look like that not being the reality. Success will look like parents in core neighborhoods being in position to increase income and earnings, right? Why is that important? Some obvious reasons, but I want to read a quote from a United Way Alice document related to this. It says, financial stability is directly related to better child outcomes in health, education, and future economic stability. Increases in wages can boost family income and reduce poverty immediately and build stability in the long term. If substantial, increased wages can improve children's development and promote upward generational social mobility. So it's not just a matter of simple folks earning more money, but really having a long-term family impact, right? And all of us, I would dare say, you know, most of you all on the diocese are in a position where you earning a living wage at least, right, to take care of your families. So you know the importance of that. The last thing in terms of what success look like, thinking about the challenge of silos, increased alignment and linking of systems and funding streams to help family well-being in the core neighborhoods. So again, partnering and working together in ways which we can support family well-being in the core neighborhoods. So that could mean money. This is a systems change piece. It could mean money. It could mean technology. It could mean, shifts in habits, knowledge, attitudes, skills, even power, right? Organizations explicitly having staff time allocated to potential partnerships in order to help well-being of families in our core communities. That's what success will look like in terms of this work. So I've been talking about place and the power of place, importance of place as it relates to people, families in our core neighborhoods. The next couple slides kind of put a fine point on that, as I said. The next slide is from the Robert Johnson Woods Foundation. And the question is straightforward: could where you live influence how long you live? And the answer is yes. This is something that's playing out across the nation, not just in our community, but these are two neighborhoods in our city, and it represents vastly different potential life opportunities for people that live a short span apart. This is roughly 3 miles apart. And it's a 10-year lifespan difference, right? So as we think about place and we think about opportunities for families, I want you all to imagine the relationships you could build in 10 years. I want you all to imagine the opportunities for wealth that you could build in 10 years. Imagine the opportunities for educational attainment or the ability to give back to your community in 10 years, right? And so this is another reason to focus, why we're focusing on place, why we're focusing on families in that particular place. The next slide is from the Opportunity Atlas. This is work and research done by Raj Shetty from Harvard. And the Opportunity Atlas answers the question, which neighborhoods in America offer the best chance for children to get out of poverty? And they use data, anonymous data, following 20 million Americans into their mid-30s. And this is a screenshot from Opportunity Atlas. This is the same address from Northside neighborhood that was on the previous slide. But this slide highlights two things. One, again, the power of place, right? So based on the neighborhood, and this is looking at child income into their 30s, right? Second thing, the power of focusing on family and this 2-gen approach. So parents' financial position today affects children's outcomes tomorrow, right? And that's in part what this research shows. And so, again, this is why we're trying to focus on place. This is why we're trying to partner with other folks in the community to have them understand why this is important. Many of the organizations in our community are either countywide or even multi-county. So by design, they're not thinking about 3 neighborhoods in the city of Kalamazoo, right? But as SBK coordinator and knowing everything we've come to find out and what I'll discuss this evening, is my job as advocate for those families. You have to focus on that, right? Because we understand the impact. This last slide, I'm gonna try to tie everything up. And this is a quote that I came across, and I use it to remind myself and to remind others of the importance of what we've been discussing this evening. Children don't grow up in programs. They grow up in families and communities. Children do well when families do well. And families do well when they live in supportive communities. So it begs the question, how strong are we in terms of supporting our families in our core neighborhoods, right? And so this is something, like I said, I use it to re-energize myself. I use it to ground myself in the work that we're trying to do. With that, I'm gonna close out. I don't know if it's any question or discussion, but I thank you again for the opportunity for jumping into this tonight. And I want to thank my guest, Michael Evans. Also, since I got this platform, I want to send a shout out to our organizing committee, which Commissioner Cooney is a part of, my colleagues at Community Planning and Economic Development, and our team there. So thank you.
First of all, just from the entire commission here, thank you very much, Mr. Ford, for coming and spending some time with us this evening and going through this. And it's a good reminder. I'm sorry it has been so long. It is, can't let that happen again. And Mr. Evans, very familiar with the great work you're doing. Thank you for being here and being part of this presentation. Just a real reminder that the only way for our community to be successful is that all of us work together, all the individuals and organizations that are doing great work continue to be pulling together in the same direction. And this helps just to talk about it. Any questions for Mr. Ford at this time?
Sure.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Cooney.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kevin. That was a wonderful presentation, really great. And thank you, Michael. Thanks for both of you for the great work that you do. You guys do great work. I would just like to lay out a little bit of the challenge that we're facing. In that, next to the last slide that you showed us, Kevin, it says the poverty rate on the north side in that tract, 50%. 50%. And I looked at some statistics from the ALICE, the studies that they've done. And in looking at Kalamazoo County, now we know that if you put in the city within the county, it's going to make it look better. So we know it's worse in the city. But just to review, what ALICE means is there's two different categories they look at. Poverty rate, which is the national standard about how many people are below a certain income. But then ALICE, in the United Way, looks at a community and looks how much it costs to live in that community. And they look at people that are not in poverty, that have somebody in their family working, but they're not earning enough to meet their family's needs. So I just want to read you a couple statistics on that. In the county, Kalamazoo County, I'm looking at children now. Among white children, 35% of those kids live in families that are either in poverty or in ALICE. When we look at black children, it is 76%. When we look at Hispanic children, it's 92%. And when we look at single female-headed households in the county, 76% of them are in poverty or below the ALICE. So what I want to say is that if there's any community in the United States that could do something about this very significantly, more significantly than we're doing now, it's this county, it's this city. And now we have some resources with the ARPA funds. And I just think that you can't work any harder than you're working, he can't work any harder than he's working. We need to give you a lot more help. I think this city has a challenge here to look at these statistics and say, there's no more important work than we have to do than to look at families and children and help them succeed in this community.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Other questions for Mr. Ford at this time? Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make a comment. As Commissioner Cooney said, Mr. Evans, Mr. Ford, thank you so much for that presentation. It is very informative. And again, some of the new commissioners here, this is a lot of great information. I love the approach on the two-step generation effect. I do wonder if individuals want to volunteer and help, who would they contact? Is there a process for that?
They can contact me. I'm not hard to find. I think my work email is somewhere public. If not, I can certainly get it out there to folks. So yeah, you can contact me. Like I said, my vice is coffee, so I'm a cheap date. We can have coffee and talk about however they want to inject themselves in helping us move this along.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to say, you know, I love the quote that you had said at the end, because here, you know, when you think about it, the city of Kalamazoo, we are the tide. And when we can raise that tide, the ship that's on it is also going to rise. And I feel that when we're able to rise families out of poverty, everybody benefits from that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Any other questions or statements at this time? Yeah, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, thank you. You know I'm one of your biggest fans. I remember coming in Rick Stravers at Open Doors and starting to do this work. So kudos to you and the whole team. I really love the focus areas because it speaks to exactly what we are trying to build in Kalamazoo: families, jobs, and youth. For me, these are focus areas that are the foundation for healthy, vibrant communities and neighborhoods. So I'm so glad that these are SBK's focus areas, and whatever I can do, if you need me to come on a podcast, I can do that for you. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. Commissioner Bradel.
Mr. Ford, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Just wanted to note something here. You mentioned the challenges that you see. The first challenge you mentioned is addressing the silos, and I couldn't agree more with you. But I think the thing that is notable about the work that you're doing and the work that the KLC is doing is if you look in the example that you gave, you said the second cohort, round cohort, it looked like there were 8 agencies that were all working in this 2-gen approach.
Yep.
So all working towards that same common thread, even if they might be working in some semi-different work to achieve that. But then when you look at the specific example with the KLC, just in their in the Edison and projects that they're working on, had 13 agencies that they're involved with. And you know, we often talk about that local government cannot be the sole entity to solve every problem. But what it can be is it can be a convener, and it can be that spark and catalyst and modeling those behaviors and bringing people together. And I think you're a great example of that, and the KLC is a great example of that as well. So hats off to both of you. And I think, you know, talking about the work of addressing silos, measuring and accounting for both accountability for measuring effectiveness, and then also the third one about implementing multi-year funding. In my experience in the nonprofit world, and anybody else who's up here in the nonprofit world, that is about as spot on can get. And so I think this is a great model for all of us and all the community to look at as a solution to this work. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradel. So once again, I'm just going to say, let's make sure it's not so long next time. And I know we can get together over coffee, but I think it's also important to do it here in public. So I really appreciate your efforts, both of you. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. I wanted to say this as well, since I got this platform. I think this may be recorded. I hope so. I would love for anybody in community to contact me and discuss some transportation options. I know that's been a long-standing issue in terms of helping families, and the conversation seems to start and stop at Metro, and they're great. Shout out to Kathy Schultz at Metro, but I think in our community, we have the opportunity for some more innovative transportation transportation models that help families get where they need to be. And this is a workforce issue as well in terms of obtaining and maintaining employment. All the opportunities won't be in our neighborhoods or even in our city. So if we're talking about accessing good jobs, those good jobs may be in another county, and reliable transportation is a part of that. So definitely want anybody to contact me to talk about that and co-create some innovative ways we can inject some different transportation models to help families.
Thanks again. I know we've got another presentation tonight. Folks are out of town, and I'm not sure how long that presentation is, but I want to make sure we have enough time for that before our 7 o'clock meeting. Do you have any idea about time frame there?
I would ask our 40 minutes? Yeah.
About 40 minutes,
So-
okay. So Commissioner Cradle, did you have another question before?
I was just going to mention, Mr. Ford, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but Kurt Artema is back there, and he's one of the more brilliant people I know, and he's very passionate about transportation and is involved with the local transportation boards, and so definitely encourage both of you to connect.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you all again. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much. So we have some visitors here in Kalamazoo. Is that accurate, Manager?
Yes, we do. I would like to ask our city planner, Christina Anderson, to come forward, and she's got some guests from the University of Notre Dame that she would like to introduce, and they're going to present on downtown planning for public space. Christina?
Thank you, City Manager Ritzma. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation is going around, so you'll be able to have it in front of you. We have with us tonight a team from Notre Dame, as well as consultants from around the country who are working with the students to do this capstone project. We're pretty lucky that they chose downtown Kalamazoo to do their work. The main presenters for this evening are Marianne Cusato and Stefanos Palazoidis, and I'll let them do the full introductions. I just want to say for both you and the viewing audience, this is the midpoint of their work. It's an intensive 4-day activity. A presentation on Wednesday evening in this room at 5:30 p.m. will present kind of the final report of their work. So everyone is welcome to attend that as well. Oh. Did he not? Here.
So it's forward right?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor Anderson, City Manager Ritzma, City Attorney Robinson, and Commissioners. Thank you for inviting us to address you. We come with having worked hard and having spent real time looking at your city, and we're deeply appreciative for this opportunity, particularly so because your staff has extended their confidence in us to take on such a really important project for your future. I'm Stefanos Palazoidis, and I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture at Notre Dame. I'm also a professor there and an architect and urbanist of long standing. I'm in front of you tonight, this afternoon, it's not night yet, representing a team of professionals. Landscape architect is a member of our team, or landscape architects, professional academic architects as well. We've spoken to economists and retail consultants in preparation. We have an illustrator on our team. We have people from various fields that allow us to work together to address a question of this kind of complexity. And the process we're following, and I should add that there is half a dozen students as well. Total number of our team is 13. So it's a pretty unruly group of people. You should really come by and see how energized this group is and how amazing the work process is. The process we're working under is called a charrette. Most professional engagements of this kind are typically intermittent. People just get a job from a group to do a project, and there is a lead firm, and the lead firm chooses subconsultants, and They work on the project every 3 weeks or 3 days or 3 months or whatever it is, separately with each party, separately within people within their own office. And this process is typically very broken up, and it takes a great deal of effort to both put it together and to communicate it properly to clients. A charrette, by example, by comparison, is an example of a process that is very much concentrated in time, spending pretty much the same amount of time as a typical consultation process, but it involves a great deal of communication, a great deal of direct experience in the project area with the clients, working all together to try to work things out in the shortest period of time, allowing for much greater degree of communication, a greater degree of insight, and much firmer, much widely acceptable results for recommendations. Because a lot of planning is observation. A lot of planning has to do with looking at past examples of planning and past examples of building, and assessing it and assessing them and making sure that one understands how to extend those into future actions. We are working in various areas of design. You have to keep in mind that the way in which planning has been done in the past has been very disconnected in the world. We have the engineering departments work with engineers, architects with architects, planners with planners, and there has been very little integration. And we think that this way of working suggests that we should all be working much more closely together to get things done and learn from each other and bring these observations about how this work needs to be done together in order to make optimal recommendations. It'll surprise you to hear that we've spent a couple of months preparing, almost 3 months preparing. So this charrette is not arbitrary. We didn't parachute into the city trying to solve these problems. We've been very much in touch with the facts, both by visiting and by looking at reports and numbers and issues and drawings and so on. And we've spent maybe 500 hours of our team's time in preparation. 500 hours will be spent during the charrette by this 13 members, and probably another 500 hours for following through and making sure that we have recommendations and reports and drawings and words and so on that make sense across the board. So it is a complicated process of very high energy interactions, but long term it comes through as a series of proposals and recommendations that have very wide acceptance by client groups. Your Department of Planning and Economic Development in this case, because they've been so close to us and they've been directing us and adjusting us as we move on from issue to issue. I want to say only one last thing. We're going to ask Professor Cusato to take on the rest of the presentation. Marianne is also the director of our new Center for Housing and Community Redevelopment, which is a group of architects within the school and other professionals within the university that are taking on the issue of how cities, particularly in a region, could be organized to rebuild their centers in particular, but also the neighborhoods in a way that is more successful and more productive in the long run. And I want to show you only one drawing, if I could bring the drawing up. Some help with this? Right side. Do I direct it someplace? Bottom? No. Oh, it's a little bottom one. Okay, good. So this was the charrette slide, and the only notable thing about the slide, other than watching us working and wandering around the city, is that one of our team members came on Uber from the airport to the hotel that we're staying and presented us with this little diagram that was slipped to him by the Uber driver about how the issue of public space in the city needs to be resolved. So we have all the intelligence we need. We're completely at ease with the idea of how this ought to be done. And this person will be given full credit. Now the bottom one is not working, Marianne. There we go. So happily, this is my last slide, and I'll move off the podium. Somebody else can take on slide changing. But these, and I know the image to the bottom right is not terribly clear, but I think it must be an image of downtown circa. The building we're in is in the bottom right, and this is an area of the downtown probably circa 1940, something like that, either right before the war or right after it. And the downtown is completely solidly built. And it is what the next downtown ought to be. It is compact, it's diverse, it's walkable, it's mixed in use. So and it is full, it is whole, it's full integrated. And the current state of downtown, which is expressed in the rather disturbing diagram in the top left, which is not very visible from the ground, because on the ground we cannot see across. We have to either fly over the city or look down upon it in a plan. In red are all the either open properties with no buildings on them or parking lots. So I would say probably something close to 50 to 60% of all space in downtown Kalamazoo is actually open, which is quite remarkable. In some ways, we have to agree that we have failed collectively in the task of reconstructing the center of the city and the cities in this region, because this is not a Kalamazoo problem, this is an American problem across the board. And so in order to build the kind of city that needs to come to be, as I said before, then the diverse, the compact, the walkable, the mixed in use, we really need to return to the values of the city that was destroyed over the last 80 years and start really thinking about how not to think that the new building, the fresh and the shiny new building is the solution to our problems. But the solution to the problem is understanding where we are, how we are, what matters in the current conditions, and how to get back to building the city the way it was built before, between the 1800s and 1940, which is one building at a time, minding the community as a whole, not only the interests or the benefits or the nature of one person in one place, but the community as a whole. And so the first question that we ask is there a center in this downtown? And I will ask Marianne to take on the answer to that question and go on from there.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. This is the diagram in red is very shocking. The first time I saw it, I think everybody the first time we see it, it feels very shocking. But it also, before I start, I want to Stefano sort of painted the scary picture, and now I get the fun part of saying the exciting part, which is that you have an amazing city. And the pieces that are coming together in this city, starting with the political will to create a great place, the amazing, and congratulations on the amazing funding that you've just received to realize it, and the time at which we are living in that we understand the importance of walkability in public realm, that we know that place matters, that place changes outcomes, that the economic development is tied to the streets and how they create place. And so what you have here really is the perfect storm of great things that are outweighing, hopefully, the red on this diagram. So it really is, I mean, congratulations to you guys for where you are. From our point of view, we're coming from your sister city in South Bend, an hour and a half away. We've just converted our one-way streets. We're living that and experiencing it. Our team is a national team that is bringing best practices from all over, and the combination of those things, when we arrive here and we actually see intact parts of your downtown that still have that, when you arrive, you all know where they are. You know when you're walking through, you can feel the difference when you're walking down Michigan, and when it takes that angled turn, you can feel it. And that's what we want to capture. We want to capture and understand, and you already do. You understand that the two-way street will change that, because you get that. You've brought us to this point where we're able to come in now and hopefully help you knit that together. So that's what we're here for this week, is to come in and try and help connect the dots. What is it? So we're working at a very top level of what's the network and what is the heart of downtown, and how do you get around it? How does the public realm activate and engage? And then zooming in on the street level and actually looking at what that means, the experience of being there, and continuing at multiple layers to do that. We've looked at streets and transportation and traffic. We're looking at public realm and the layers at which the city activates. We're looking at land use and massing and the volumes at which the buildings are engaging. We're looking at where the retail is. And so we've broken up into teams that are doing this. And as we're looking at these layers, we're considering not only the long term, because we need a vision for the long term, but if you're only looking at the long term without looking at the immediate and the short term, you can never get there. And if we're only looking at the short term to meet our immediate needs, we can never get to the long term. So what we're doing in this process is trying to balance each of those to create a strategy that will allow you to have easy wins early while you're creating a vision that will get you back to the great place that you once were and activate. I mean, this is a great city. You have all of the pieces in place, but we're hoping that adding this layer of investigation through this study and through this work can help you, give you a roadmap to really realizing, and now I'm in the, there we are. So one of the first things we said, as Stefanos identified, is the key question, and we started yesterday morning and said, where is the center of downtown? And it took a bit of a conversation. This diagram actually shows you, we all know where the center of downtown is. It's right at that corner of Burdick and Michigan, where the heart is. From that moment, it's where the urbanism is still intact. It's where you feel as you're entering into it, coming up Michigan, and see the angle of the street when you can look up and down the Kalamazoo Mall, that you feel the gravity of that place, that you feel containment, that the public realm is activated. From that, and you can see it in this diagram, these are what's called a figure ground diagram, where it's just showing buildings and open space. We've taken everything else out. So the building is creating the containment. And when you're walking down a street, the containment, the width of the street, the height of the buildings, that will activate whether you feel like you're in a contained outdoor room or whether you're standing in space. When you're earlier down on Michigan, in the 7 lanes of one way coming at you, one of our colleagues here, Rick Hall, who will present in a moment, clocked someone going over 80 miles an hour there yesterday, on a Sunday morning even. So just how hard that is as a pedestrian to engage with it or feel safe. So your center, there we go. Here is your center. Your center is where that star is. It is, it's the cross between Michigan and Burdick. It turns up and sort of curves and comes out from, it radiates out from that. Once we determine that, this is the heart, this is the center, we started to ask questions, well, what does that mean? The first thing that meant in our feelings, and we would love feedback as well in the assessment, is that that's where retail needs to be. So the red line represents what our proposed concentration of retail is. You have the Bob Gibbs report, the consultant that created that report. We are really leaning on that to understand when we do our diagrams and when we draw and when we propose, how the numbers relate to what we're drawing. It's important that we look at the size of the city and we don't spread retail out. We want to concentrate it. We want to give the retail a fighting chance to be the most successful that it can be. And to do that, especially as we're getting these two-way streets back and provide parking that allows somebody to park and get to multiple stores, you want that concentration. So our proposal is that you focus at the center, radiating out from the center, your retail. What it does is we were looking then next to, if that's the center, what's the network? What is the network of the public realm? And we identified, as you're looking at the Acadia Park, the new cultural center, Bronson Park, where we are now, you're actually ringing into these quadrants, two very clear quadrants up at the top, The bottom can be divided into one larger quadrant with sub-areas. And this public realm then that's engaging around the retail, you don't want the commercial to spread out there. You want the public engagement in other ways. You have cultural elements. So you can see where somebody might come, have dinner in your retail area and walk to the cultural center. Or you could bring in food carts up at the park and have people go over. So we're looking at, as this network comes back, as we're engaging these streets, how the ring around your retail supports it. And then the next layer on top of that is the residential. And each of the residential will have different qualities depending on where it is, because it's going to be higher in certain areas, but then as we get out down Michigan, probably come down lower into some maybe apartment buildings, some townhouses, what we would call missing middle housing. It's not single family and it's not a big tower. It's the fabric that that defines that outdoor room. This allows you to, if you articulate this vision to say, the red line is where we want retail. Once we break down from there, we're defining the street, but we're doing it with housing that's at a smaller scale in some areas, a larger scale in others, that you're giving a roadmap, because we're here to say, this is what it could be, but you guys will be left with making it something, and we're very aware of that. We don't want to come to you with just sort of these wonderful visions and wave and head out. We want to leave you with a toolkit that allows you to help shape and incentivize. And so we met this morning with your economic development team to discuss the low-hanging fruit for new retail would be to come on one of the larger vacant lots. How do we incentivize success for the businesses that are coming in? How do we incentivize the fabric to come in other areas? So these are the layers that we're thinking about as we look through, look at the city in the different pieces. What we've done also is we're doing a very active, so and we've intentionally have them be very small. We will be coming back on Wednesday with much larger images, but we want to give a snapshot, and we understand too that we have limited time. So the presentation is, now that I've talked a little bit more on the earlier slides, I'm going to go a little faster here and talk about some of the layers at which we are looking. We're doing a deep dive into your streetscapes. Why does one building feel different than another? So we're assessing it. And we've come up with 3 levels. One, which is to be protected, because the fabric buildings, we very often, when we think of historic preservation, we think, let's protect the building we're in right now, which is an amazing building, by the way. We've been really enjoying just being in this room and feeling dignified in the proceedings with the height and the space itself engages the activity. But very often we only look at the star buildings, and we don't give as much credit to the fabric buildings that line the streets that just feel right as you're going by them. So our proposal is to really understand, and we're going through and looking at the streetscapes and looking at which buildings are activating your street, and how do we make sure you protect those? What buildings are in that area but not as active as they could be, and proposing that over time you consider incentivizing shopfront rehabilitation, shopfront, that would reskin buildings. And then taking a serious look, and we pause before we would put anything a replace building, and this is we want to be very cautious about that. But there are some buildings, if we're concentrating in certain areas, over time to really consider, is it engaging the streetscape? Is it contributing to this longer term vision, and considering that? But that is a very cautious one, and we fully recognize that. So it's just a note up there. But we're undergoing a deep dive in this cross that is creating your town center. In the process of that, we've started looking at your historic preservation designations to understand what is currently protected, what is not. If we're concentrating the retail, if we're saying this is your city center, then we also want to say, how do we protect it? How do we make sure that what you have there remains? It's this wonderful place. So right now, pink indicates what is currently protected under your local historic preservation, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush because I know that it is much more complicated, but essentially there are protections against buildings. You can't tear one of those down without having being very going through a lot of layers. The purple, or I'm sorry, the blue is currently federally protected. But that gives incentives, and again, I'm painting with a very broad brush, that gives incentives to keep it, but it doesn't actually stop it from being taken down. And I understand that you've just lost two buildings that did contribute to your community and to your city. And so we're recommending that you if possible, and we sort of, this is part of many, a layer of suggestions, understanding that there's a lot of nuance to it, that you find ways to protect these buildings. The federal ones will be more difficult than you know, like the old post office, things like that. Your city is better because it's here. It's part of what makes you unique. And we're also we're proposing that you very seriously look at listing the fabric buildings that are creating the place that when you walk down, you went that make it feel better. And so this is a diagram. We'll be continuing to refine it, but really elevating and taking stock of what you have. And as the first thing, before you build anything else, just say, this matters and we're going to keep it because it's already creating place. It's always easier to add to something great than it is to start over. And you've already got amazing things. So finding a way to keep that. This is now what we're on top of the, actually, let me go back if I can make it turn. There we are. As we go now, we're going to start zooming in and looking at some of the key areas throughout the city and throughout that network of how we're adding our strategies beyond the preservation. This is looking at alley activation. So you have, you know, this is a testament to the people of Kalamazoo, who even in a cold climate and with one-way streets, you just said, no, we want to walk and we are going to take over the alleys. So you have such a unique, this is so unique and wonderful. And so what we're saying is lean into it and take it and make these alleys really special. So one of our very talented colleagues who's joining us from Philadelphia, Brian Mork, has done these drawings. He's looking at the alley that is connecting in between Bronson and Burdick, and creating cafes, outdoor spaces, looking at where vistas are terminated and saying, put energy here. We're not going to design the details, but we're going to leave it to say, activate this moment, activate this, repave these other areas with actually very minor interventions, paving, some awnings, trees. You can activate this space and create where you have individual, in a lot of cases, backs of buildings and other buildings that aren't knit together through the paving within the public right-of-way, through landscaping and more murals, things like that, some strategic moments where an opening might be added if it works. You can activate these alleys. You can, where people are in them already and they're not necessarily all great places, they can become truly, truly special places. This, as we're looking, so we're back at the big scale now, looking at the city, the connection between Arcadia Park and the new cultural center in another couplet. You have a lot of couplets in the city with the one-ways, but this one we're proposing is, as you unpack this, you connect between both at the street level and then at this daylighted creek. One of the things, so this is a sketch by we're very lucky to have with us a landscape architect from Pittsburgh named Fred Bonci. He's here with us today. He has done this drawing in the next one. And one of the things that he said very early on yesterday as we were walking around, he said, you have this water, you have this connection, but we're trapped. We can't touch any of it. And if you go to all your public spaces, you have this daylighted creek, and you can't get to it. You can hear it. It's just out of reach. When you get to the park, you can see things. It's just there. You can't actually engage with it. So what he's proposing is that we open that up, that you bring pedestrians down to it. You can bring at the anchors, you can actually bring with amphitheaters down, you can connect down to the street, have steps up in other areas. He's also identified that the park is actually too big. When you go and stand in that park, you feel Like, it could be a great place, but it is so huge, you don't get containment, that if you actually cut it basically by a third, a little, almost a half, you can engage more and feel protected, and by engaging to the water, the space that you have will be activated. And now you have a developable lot in that, but taking a smaller space and actually using it by engaging it. So this is a series of ideas that we're working on. We're working on the network of how that would then connect back to Bronson Park. We will be continuing to develop this over the course of the next couple days, and have more developed ideas later on in the week. There we go. Oh, this is a detail looking at that, looking at some of the sections of how you would engage down to the water, and connecting through, really engaging. It's engaging and activating. You have all of the raw ingredients. It's just a matter of activating the alleys, activating the creek, activating the park. Here we are. That was the public realm. That is how what's happening as you're going through it. This is a diagram that's a version of what you are very familiar with, is the transition from the one-ways to the two-way. And so we're going to shift now from how we move around at the